Welcome to the Relationships Inside Out podcast with Doctors Gregory Siebert and Kimberly Murray, licensed marriage and family therapists. Join them on this journey as they explore the ins and outs of relationships.
Well, welcome to Relationships Inside Out, where today we're going to talk about the power of perception.
How we view things directly impacts our interpretation and thus our reactions or actions to those things.
It's fascinating because I think there's a whole world of emotions are important and they're important and, we don't have necessarily control over them. But then there's also a big part that's like, hey, our cognitions and how we think about things affects how we feel, right? This comes from like the cognitive theory realm. But there is some truth to this in the sense of the meaning that we place on things is going to impact how we feel about that. And the things that we have meaning about, like situations that happen, we might not have control over them. But the one thing we do have potentially control over is how we think about them. So, for example, just kind of my own story was like when I drive, I get frustrated quite easily.
We call that road rage, Greg.
No. So I get frustrated, right? People cut you off, people riding your butt, or like, they're kind of trying to sneak in when there's clearly a merge way back. But then I travel abroad and I'm driving, I won't say the country, but I'm driving to that country and it's like a go-kart track. Everything here that someone would get beat up for or like ran down happens there. And I did not hear one horn unless people were inches away from hitting.
So it's almost like a warning sign rather than like a FU sign.
Yeah, it was fascinating.
Yeah.
And I was driving in this because I rented a car. And I was thinking to myself, wait, this is just the norm out here. Like, this isn't like a threat. Like, this is just how they normally drive.
Sure.
And it's not personal. So I was in the wrong place in the turn lane and I needed to go straight. And I was in the inside turn lane. There's two turn lanes. And I'm like, well, if no one cares, this is what I'm going to do. So I literally gunned it and went straight at a turn lane. Not one horn, nothing. I looked at people's faces and they're just like, average. Matter of fact, it was so...
You just joined in on the chaos.
It joined in. Well, and it was fascinating too because I was turning into a gas station and somebody was crossing. So I stopped to let them cross and they looked at me weird. I'm like, well, I ran into them inside the gas station. They're like, you're not French, are you? Right? Or you're not... I forget what the... And so I'm like, no. And I'm like, why do you know that? They're like, because you let me in or you let me cross.
Interesting.
And it was just fascinating that they could tell. And when I was driving, someone else said the same thing. Like, you're not from here, are you? Because I was letting people in and cross and like waving them in and stuff. And they're just looking at me like, what the hell? So I come back and I don't get nearly as frustrated. Even my wife's like, you don't road rage anymore. I was like, yeah, I mean, I just kept telling myself, like, when in that country, right? Like,
perception is everything.
and I'm just like, if that's just normal, like, where did my sense of justice of how, and I'm going to use air quotes for people listening, how people should drive come from?
Sure.
And I've been in other countries with the military, and there's countries where they don't even have like lines for lanes. It's
That
bumper
just
to
like
bumper.
instantly gives me panic.
But it's fascinating because it's all relative. But if I didn't have that experience, my sense of justice would still be the same here. And I'd be upset if someone did X, Y, Z, right? It's like this need for control.
Sure.
I mean, that's where a lot of our idea of how things should happen, which again is culturally informed, comes from the sense of we need safety.
We need to feel comfortable.
And part of it's predictability. If I know things respond or react within these parameters that I deem okay, then I'm okay. But as soon as somebody goes outside of this, my own sense of justice or these shoulds or expectations, then that's when the dissonance and stress happens. So
it is fascinating how you can shift a perspective, right? Similar to your story with my husband, he gets a little cranky behind the wheel. And I try to tell him, like, maybe that person that was speeding or cut you off, maybe their wife's in labor. Maybe their mom just died and they're having a bad day. Maybe they have emergency diarrhea. I don't know.
That's what I use humor a lot. I'm like, they're shitting themselves. It's touching cotton right now. We've all been there. And because the reality, it doesn't matter what the truth might be. It's you have control over how that situation affects you by shifting the meaning. Now, we're not talking about necessarily like a drastic change. like, oh, I'm not angry anymore. You're still going to have some frustration.
Sure.
Like, I think about the power of perception is if I can change the meaning a little bit to get some relief, then that's no longer consuming me. But
And it's about you in that moment, not them.
it's
It's about protecting my own peace, not about trying to make some interpretation about the other person or punish them by cutting them back off or whatever it might be. It becomes about preserving my peace.
in one, I would say, and there's a list of these unhelpful thinking styles, right? There's like 10 of them. There's probably more, but there's a predominant 10 that are listed. And one of those is personalization.
Mm-hmm.
I see that one a lot. This is where we find reasons, very automatically of why we're at fault or we're the ones to blame or something's wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
I see that one a lot. And
Sure.
I think about in the context of work when someone's getting feedback or in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
That one's a big one.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing is like, okay, maybe we do have some fault and to create some balance. Because I think about this as the whole goal is to create balance. Our mind, does a good job of trying to protect us. Sometimes after trauma, it's extensively trying to protect us and
Mm-hmm.
overwhelmingly and maybe not helpful. So we need to bring balance back to that.
Sure.
And so it's kind of like, all right, my mind is saying this has something to do with me. This is dangerous. I need to figure something out. But then kind of training or practicing more adaptive perspective would be, what are the reasons this doesn't have to do with me? My boss is having a bad day. That person who criticized me is just miserable.
Mm-hmm.
My family who doesn't want to connect has nothing to do with me.
They had past trauma and something that I did maybe triggered that past trauma.
But it's not my fault that I did
Right.
those things, right? It's
Right.
their job to communicate that and set that kind of expectation for themselves of what's going on for them. But
At the core of this is regaining your power and control. I get to choose how I think about things. And I can hear some people saying, like, that's not true. It is true. You have to take the time and the energy to shift these thought processes. It's not going to happen overnight, right? It takes some effort to kind of reprogram some of our neural pathways. But I talk about dishes with couples. I don't know what it is. Every couple client I have brings up the mother effing dishes every
Oh.
time. But it's not about the dishes. If my partner says, I'm going to do the dishes and they don't, I can interpret it as they're lazy, they don't care about me, they take me for granted, whatever. Or I can interpret it as they forgot. Or this is a symptom of their ADHD. Or they had a stressful day at work and their brain is cluttered.
Yeah. All reasons that don't have to do with you.
Facts.
Yeah.
And how I take that in impacts, one, my responsibility, right? Am I responsible for the behavior? No. I get to just own my part. Two, how I respond to them. If I think they're really tired from work, my next response to them is going to be softer. Hey, I noticed the dishes didn't get done. How was your day at work? Are you okay? You don't even have to mention the dishes.
Yeah.
Versus, you never do the dishes. Why do you never help around
You
here?
don't care about me.
Oh.
Yeah.
But my interpretation absolutely impacts the response I'm going to give my partner if I respond at all, right? But that is totally in your control.
In the moments, we're really not conscious of this because, and I used this language earlier, is we have a lot of more initial automatic thoughts that come up
Sure.
that are there to protect us. And unfortunately for a lot of us, that's shaped by our attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we have an insecure attachment, that shapes our perception of why things are happening. And a lot of times it has to do with because I'm not good enough, something's wrong with me, they don't like me.
Previous evidence that this was true.
Yeah, and you actually use that lens to confirm our own bias.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of the I guess the goal and the advantage of practicing adaptive thinking or questioning our perception is getting out of that, not allowing that lens to kind of control reality, if that makes sense. Because I can see a lot of couples where, one partner forgot to ask the other one to go to the gym and they went. And it's in their basement, right? So it wasn't like they got in the car and left. And they were really upset.
Mm-hmm.
And then we challenged that and it was like, well, what are reasons that it had nothing to do with you that they went down there?
Mm-hmm.
They were lost in their own mind because of work and
Mm-hmm.
and it shaped it and it kind of changed it and you could see in them turn toward and kind of like apologize and things like that. It's very important that we reflect on these examples
100%.
because a lot of us aren't really conscious of these processes.
It takes major effort to get conscious about it. But here's the beauty of it too. If I interpret, say the dishes, I interpret it as my partner had a hard day and I come at him with compassion and curiosity of his day, he's going to soften. What happens when he softens? He's going to want to actually do the dishes. He's going to want to help more. He's going to want to care about me and attend to my needs.
Yeah.
Versus if I come in guns a-blazing, he's going to give me the FU and not want to do anything for me or with me.
Yeah.
And so it's not just about controlling our reactions in that moment. It actually comes to our benefit later in terms of our own needs.
There's this couple I was working with, and they've done a lot of great work, communication skills. They have it all down, but this one cycle kept coming up, and at the core of it was personalization.
Mm-hmm.
And once that kind of got recognized, that cycle broke, and they were able to turn toward each other, because instead of being defensive from personalizing, they were like, "Wait a second, they're having a bad day, or my partner's personalizing because they're insecure. They're not blaming me. This has nothing to do with me. They're allowed to be upset." It just completely revamped their site just by changing the perception.
Just by taking a moment to pause and reflect. A big one we see is shutting down.
Yeah.
My partner went mute on me. They're not talking. They must be mad at me. What did I do? Oh my gosh, now we're going to fight. When inside their partner is A, nothing because they're so overwhelmed, they're not thinking. Or B, they're thinking about parenting, work, and all the extra shit. And it has nothing to do with partner. But the interpretation is going to be, I'm not going to come to my partner and say, what do I do now? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And then that partner is going to feel like, whoa, where'd this come from? And now we're off to the races.
What makes it difficult, though, is say the partner who's overstimulated with work and come home to the kids, they might even be grumpy or irritable towards the partner. And so it's very hard to depersonalize it when there might be even a personal attack. And at the same time, it has nothing to do with you. Rough day, they're human, they're irritable.
Just ask, hey, I'm noticing you're a little more irritable, or I'm noticing your body seems tense. Can we talk about what's going on? Yeah, work was absolute shit today. Okay, well, that answers my question.
Yeah. What's going on for you? What do you need right now? Like,
ask. Don't assume. At the core of this, we can't assume someone's intentions. We can't assume what someone's thinking or feeling or their beliefs.
Yeah.
Get curious. You've got to ask. You don't ask, you won't know.
That's one thing. So when working with couples, I can tell where the other person's mind is in terms of these unhelpful thinking styles and how they're making meaning of the situation by how they label the other person's experience.
Sure.
Like, oh, you're pissed off at me. Am I? You're unhappy with me. You don't care about me.
You don't care about me. I was just going to say that one.
And it's like, wait a second. Wait, you're labeling your partner's experience. So inside that's happening.
Right.
And granted, it goes back to what I said a little bit ago is there's a lot of attachment stuff happening here.
Oh, yeah.
My
mom would go quiet on me as a punishment. So therefore, if you're quiet on me, you must be angry like she was. Or because of my own anxiety, if you're quiet on me, I don't know how to interpret that. So it stirs up that insecure attachment, and I'm off to the races.
And this is what I love. That I ask this question to couples is, where did that narrative come from? That when your partner does this, it means this. Since when does A plus B equals C? Where did you learn that? And unfortunately, a lot of it comes from our childhood, right? Well, my parents didn't fight, so we're fighting, so this means X. Bingo. Or anger. Anger is a big one. A lot of people are very uncomfortable with their partner being angry. And it's like, well, what role did anger play in your life growing up?
Or past partners.
Like what is the meaning you have around there? And where's your narrative of how people should act? Because anger doesn't appear to be in that. Or even when somebody beats themselves up.
Yeah.
Right? What barometer are you using to determine whether you deserve to punish yourself or not? And where does that come from?
I use the word evidence. What evidence do you have to support that? To support that claim, that perspective? And then to challenge it, what evidence do you have in the contrary? Because to something you said earlier, confirmation bias. If I have a belief that my partner doesn't love me, I'm going to look for all the ways that prove me right? Every dish they forget, every grouchy moment they have, every time we're disconnected. Rather than seeing what evidence do I have in the opposite? We're seeing the whole range of evidence. Confirmation bias is a natural human phenomena, and we have the ability to work on that, to control that to some degree, right? Where I can say, okay, got this feeling he doesn't care about me. Here's my evidence. Okay, where is he shown that he does care about me? If there truly is no evidence that someone cares about you, it's probably time to leave the relationship. That's a whole different conversation. But you're going to start to think about like, oh, he scraped the ice off my car. Or he did do the dishes on Tuesday, or made me soup, or gave me a hug this morning. You got to start to find the other pieces. The more you
Yeah.
find, the softer you'll be. If you're soft, your partner softens. It has this ripple effect.
I always joke that everything that's healthy for us goes against the grain of what our kind of unconscious and stuff want to do to protect us.
Truth.
The brain is the most expensive organ in the body. I mean, it consumes a lot of calories. So there's a lot of shortcuts our brain takes to conserve caloric expenditure, right? So I don't have time to be in the gray. They
Mhm.
either are good or bad, right? We see this with the psychology of in-group, out-group biases.
Sure.
Like, I'd rather just lump everyone into one group because it's safer for me to assume that they're all like dangerous. Like all lions are dangerous. I can't bring
Mhm.
one home, right? It takes energy to go in the gray and be like, how is this person different? Who are they individually? Now, it takes effort to then challenge those innate kind of
Yeah.
habits, right? This is where we see discrimination and prejudice and things like that, is when we can't get past that. It's like, I think, therefore it's true. No.
Mhm.
Why do you think? Well, I learned this from my parents. Were they right?
Who says?
Where did they learn it? Culture. Like, I mean, where did that come in? Does that mean it's right? Just because
Mhm.
you think it does not mean it's true.
We see that with American politics right now. We just had a new president come into office, and the division is heavy. But it's this belief of if you support this side, then therefore you are this person, and vice
You see
versa.
it big time.
And is that true? Is that assumption, that perception true? No.
Yeah.
They're people who have a belief about another person, sure, but they have other beliefs besides those. They still
Yeah.
engage maybe in philanthropy or give to other people or still have a general, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
There's so much more than that one thing. But when we are confirmation bias, when we are hyper focused on this one piece, this one narrative we have, we'll find all the evidence in the world for it.
Yeah. And part of it's protective,
Yeah.
right? I can continually find my own bias that they're dangerous and the person I think they are because I don't know if I can trust them because they did something that goes against what I believe. And what's interesting is, couples that I worked with where both of them voted differently,
Mhm.
you ask them is like, what about this? And a lot of people aren't voting for somebody because of their entirety.
Mhm.
There might be one, um, what's the
Issue or viewpoint.
issue or viewpoint that is salient to them, right?
Or they're just better than the other option.
Better than the option. Or like, for example, like say somebody in their own mind has a lot of fear around border security. They don't like Trump, but he might address that more readily than another person. However, that's not how our partner or other people see it. It's like, no, you're I think the language we use out here is Trumper.
Mhm.
And it's like, well, now you're labeling, right? This is how our
Right.
meaning making goes to like now they belong to them. And how do we challenge that? Well,
Mhm.
who are they outside of this, right? Why? I mean, are we even curious? Curiosity is a big
Sure.
proponent to this.
And true to the other side, right? If I believe heavily in women's rights or abortion rights, well, then you must be a full Democrat. No,
Yeah.
that is one issue, right? And maybe I prioritize that over some other issues. That's where it gets even more muddy. But it is at the core a desire for curiosity, a desire for
Hmm.
understanding. Even if we don't agree on every issue, how can I hear your perspective? How can I challenge my own bias to say, okay, they believe this one thing I don't agree with, but what do we agree on?
Yeah.
What do they do that I do love about them? There's a reason they're in your life prior to this
Yeah.
election.
And I love
Focus on
that
that.
you gave that example because this is a great like to illustrate this. So say, and I didn't like I won't disclose who I voted for or who I didn't vote for, but like say I'm on the Trump side and I care about border security, and you voted for the
Kamala.
Democrats,
Hmm.
and I'm like, and you're saying because I care about women's rights, I'm like, well, you don't care about the border.
Bingo. And that's what we hear people say.
That's not true.
You don't care about our economy. You don't care about, and it just starts to like,
Because it's going to, and this is a great example
yes.
of why it comes from my own lens and what's important to me. And, say border security is very important and I get a lot of stress around there. I look at all your decisions around whether that applies to that or not, instead of
Bingo.
understanding why you care about what you care about.
Hmm.
Oh, you're a woman who has experienced women's rights, who is directly impacted by in a different way. And that's just goes again. How are my own feelings about things affecting the meaning I'm making about somebody else and what they're doing and why they're doing it?
And we see even to the extent, so use the border one. Well, if you don't agree with me on border security, you are therefore ignorant to what's happening. You are likely dumb.
Labeling.
You are not supporting our country. in fact, you might be anti our country, we create interpretations that are just like, whoa, that has nothing to do with who I am. But because of our own sense of what's important, our own sense of beliefs or values, we create these sometimes even wild or outlandish assumptions of someone else. And that can be even true within our marriage, not even just politics, right? Think about dishes. It's just dishes, folks. Like truly, it's just dishes. But we interpret it as, you don't love me. You hate me. How do we get from a dirty plate to hate?
Yeah.
But and we think of it as a normal process that happens in, quote, all marriages. No, it doesn't have to. And how do we work on that assumption? Because we're all prone to our assumptions. But when they occur, how can I challenge that?
And the underlying should and what you're talking about is they should do the dishes without me having to ask, because that shows they care. Go back to the question, where did that narrative come that them doing dishes means they care? Like, why is that your barometer? What other evidence do you have that they care about you? This, again, goes against the grain because we're trying to protect ourselves. I need to know why they don't care about me, because if I convince myself and prove that, then I need to remove myself, right? A lot of it's protective. And it's not saying don't also share that and go to the extreme positive. It's all about balance.
Sure.
What are the reasons? Why? And in this should, unfortunately, there's not communication about this. There's just assumptions that should happen. It's like
silent assumptions.
Did you ever tell your partner this was important to you? Well, they should know. Oh, where did they learn that? Their parents? I mean, they should just know.
They should know. They should have been taught that. They're an adult.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I hate to break it to you. Okay, your partner all of a sudden steps it up and they do every dish. Your focus is going to shift. Well, they didn't clean up the kids' toys. Well, they didn't mow the lawn. If you come in with the bias of my partner doesn't care about me, it's not going to be just about the dishes.
Yep.
It's going to keep pivoting. So you are responsible for the narrative you create.
It's like that picture that I typically paint with this idea that you can give a blank piece of paper with a black dot on it, and everyone's going to notice that black dot, the imperfection. And in this example, it's like, okay, well, you just used whiteout to cover that black dot. You just moved on to the next black dot.
Fact and fact.
The next imperfection. And a lot of it's protective. Great. We need to protect ourselves. And sometimes it's more extreme depending on our history and attachment and securities, which is another area of focus to work on this.
But then you got to work on it.
You have to work on it.
You can't rest on, I had a traumatic childhood, therefore.
Yeah.
I am here to tell you, I had a really traumatic space growing up in a lot of ways, and even into my college years. It doesn't give me a license to be an asshole. It doesn't give me a license to be triggered and do whatever I want to do and have my partner just take it. I had to go through years of therapy, even as a therapist. You are responsible for your healing to deal with your triggers, your assumptions, your biases, not your partner.
Yeah.
They can't fix you.
Well, they should know.
Oh, Lord Jesus. You know how many times we hear that, Greg? There isn't a day that I do therapy that I don't hear that phrase.
I know. Same. Well, the thing that's interesting to me, we used, name calling earlier as an example as we were talking about your dishes, like, oh, you're lazy, or you don't care about what, you don't care, you're ignorant. Part of the 10 unhelpful thinking styles, and I'll put this in our resources, one of them is labeling. And I think about the unhelpful thinking styles as like some evolutionary benefit to protect us, and it makes sense to conserve caloric expenditure. Why the need to label?
Because then I can predict the threat coming up.
Categorize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can predict it, right? The body's ultimate job, the brain's ultimate job is to keep you alive and safe. If I can predict the threat, if I can put you in a category, I know what to do with you.
Yeah.
If you are ambiguous, nebulous, gray, I don't know what to do with that, so I can't predict you. And therefore, the threat is imminent at any time.
And by the way, the unhelpful thinking styles, there's 10. Again, there's probably more that aren't there. Those are the popular ones. We may not just engage in one. We might engage in like several at the same time, depending on what we're saying. You might be labeling somebody, which is very black and white, right? There's no in between of who they are. You might be personalizing and also mind reading. Like
catastrophic thinking.
They don't care about me. They're going to hate me. They're going to break up with me. They're going to, right? There's catastrophizing. They're
not doing the dishes. It must mean they don't love me. So therefore they're cheating on me and now they're going to leave me.
Mental filter, catastrophizing. Yeah. So as humans, this sheet should be called Welcome to Being Human.
Truth.
But and I tell a lot of the clients that I work with in this realm is like, this is where all humans exist. Something happens. We make meaning, whether we're even conscious of the meaning or not. A lot of us were not, because a lot of the work I do with the clients is like identifying, what do you make sense of that? Oh, well, it angers me. Why, right? What about it angers you? Oh, because of XYZ, right? There's some underlying thought typically used from this theoretical perspective. And a lot of them are stuck. Something happens, we make meaning, then we feel something. And a lot of us just respond to that emotion instead of questioning, well, why? And you'll get clients who say, well, I just go there. I automatically go there. That's true. We're automatically responding. It's
I
so
can't help it.
habituated. If you practice and condition more
Mhm.
adaptive thinking and make it practice, you'll be able to stop it or recover quicker. It doesn't mean you're going to like get rid of it,
Sure.
but you can
Sure.
recover quicker. And that's where I believe our responsibility is. And granted, you and I have been doing this for well over a decade. There's times my middle finger still comes out when I'm driving.
Gregory Siebert. Yeah. My daughter, because she listens to my husband, will be in the back seat saying, Dad, why is everyone an idiot? Why does everyone drive like this? Don't they have a driver's license? And I'm like, what in the world?
These narratives start very young.
Yeah, he's shaping my children to be little road assholes. We're working on it.
Yeah.
I'd probably do it in other ways, just maybe.
Yeah.
And we all have these ways. This isn't a judgment thing, but it is a call to responsibility. You are responsible for your reactions. When people say, I can't help that I react that way, I can't help that I feel that way, then go learn about where it comes from. Learn tools to process and heal that part, and then learn tools to cope with it. You can help it. You just don't have the skills yet to do that.
Yeah.
Let's get you the skills. Whether that's with a therapist or a support group or whatever.
Workbook or a book.
You are still responsible at the end of the day for figuring that out. You don't get a license to be an asshole to your partner, your kids, people on the road, Gregory, just because you have triggers.
Oh, I'm good. I went to this other country and I was enlightened.
Take me to this other country, Greg.
So, and it kind of came to me as we were talking about this. This is where the practice of gratitude is so powerful.
100.
It's very easy to find why life sucks, the world sucks, our political climate sucks, and why gratitude is one of the top predictors of happiness. It's because it forces us to get out of this why life sucks and what's going wrong.
Threat.
Because we need to know what's going wrong so we can protect ourselves and also fix, because we don't like the discomfort of things being wrong. But gratitude kind of takes us out of that space and is like, what do I have? What is going well?
Mm-hmm.
Wait, what? What do you mean what's going well? Like even something small, we talked about this in other episodes. Like I'm grateful that I get to have a cup of coffee every morning, that I get to go to a warm bed. It's freezing out here in Colorado. We had negative 14, 13.
It was awful.
So it kind of goes against the grain against, right? It's so much easier for our brain in a very automatic way to think about where things are going wrong so we can address them. And we need to take time to get outside of that and practice why things are going right.
Compassion is another piece I think of. You probably heard me say earlier, I'll tell Chris their mom probably died. That comes from my lived experience. When my mom died, was not a good human. I was 4 months postpartum. I was in the throes of defending my dissertation for my PhD. Wasn't a great time for Kim. Yeah. I was a raging bitch. My father-in-law can attest that at Disney World, I put that on full display. Not my best self. Would I be that person today? No. Was I then? Yeah. I was not a good human.
I mean, would you be that person today?
Mr. Siebert. But if you can walk into the world, and it sounds so macabre, you walk into the world thinking everyone slept like shit and everyone's mom died, you're going to have a lot of compassion for people. Harness your own lived experiences where you needed compassion, where you were a whole ass mess and you felt judged and you just wanted someone to hug you. Harness that day. Believe that everyone around you is having that day that is grumpy to you. And all of a sudden it goes from, man, I know that day. I know what that felt like. I'm going to give you grace. I'm going to let you cut me off and I don't care. Versus you fucking asshole. Right? I use that for myself because with my mom, I know how messy I got. And I know the people that stuck by me, even though I was really not a good human, like really not a good human. And if I can carry that forward, it softens from a part that is familiar and a part that is indisputable, right? I highly recommend it. I know it sounds macabre to think everyone's parent died that day, but there's softening that comes. And maybe it's not a parent died. Maybe for you, it's you got in a major car accident or had a trauma or postpartum depression. If you know pain, use that to frame your reference. It's empathy. It's the core of it.
Empathy. What the hell?
Right?
It's tough in the sense that and you can totally disagree if you don't think this is a healthy way to look at this.
Oh Lord.
But so there's adaptive thinking in the sense that elicits empathy. And in the same vein, maybe it benefits you not because it elicits empathy, but because you get a sense of justice from it. So for example,
Oh.
oh, that person has a horrible life. And it's like for some people that's
Oh.
sad, and the other part's like, okay, yep, they're getting theirs. Right?
Oh, like deserving, like vindictive.
So it's this idea of like they're getting their justice another
Oh, that's not
way.
good. Yeah, we don't want to go that way.
But at the same time, if it resolves somebody's like distress, that they're like, I can let it go because maybe they're having a bad day, not because of empathy, but more of like, yeah, they're human and
Karma?
they're struggling too. Like screw this. Like
Okay.
they're getting their justice. Like
See, but humanness versus karma is a different conversation. If I'm celebrating your misery, that's just going to propagate shitty emotions in me.
it depends. So they could be like, I feel better because um they're not having a good go of it, right? Like
That's not so cruel.
I'm not saying I have a stance on this. I think it's up for because I feel like it's fascinating because when clients I'm working with this, they're like, and when we use humor, they'll say, okay, yeah, they found their partner cheating on them at Walmart. And it's like, okay, why does that help you? Oh, because they're getting theirs. And it's like, okay, so and to them when they reevaluate their emotions, like, yeah, it's less. And for
It's karma, the justice of karma. Sure.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if they would define it as karma because it's like they're gonna get karma or something bad's gonna happen to them versus like they've already gone through the shit. They're experiencing something bad, and it may not listen to empathy as much as it is of like um justice or level playing field, I guess if that makes sense.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's why I said I don't know if you feel like it's healthy. I don't know either because it's not driving them to do anything that's impairing their ability to function. And it's really only affecting how they feel about it. And it's not like they're wishing it upon somebody. It's more of like telling themselves, okay, yep, they've had it bad. They've had it rough.
But is that driven out of compassion or out of vindication? Because it's driven out of compassion of like, oh, we're all human, they're having a human day, versus you deserve that, asshole. So therefore,
But does it matter if it,
see, I think it does because this one, the you deserve it, for me, like brings up like cortisol. It makes me more edgy, a little more pissy. Like
so
it brings up my startle response versus the other one has a softening.
I guess it would depend for the person.
Sure.
Because I've had some people like, I feel great.
That's you.
No, I don't. Yeah.
It's the proverbial my friend. It's actually you. You can admit it. It's fine, Greg. This is a safe space.
Yeah, I don't know. I've reflected on myself. I'm like, and I've tried to reflect on myself. I'm like, is that why I feel better about certain things when it happens? But at the end of the day, I'm like, if both people, whether they take the empathy route for that example, or they use that example as a sense of vindication, if they're going home and it's not impairing their ability to function, it's not allowing that situation to consume them, doesn't matter.
Hmm. Interesting. I'm gonna be thinking about that.
Yeah, I guess it would depend on someone's own personal beliefs. At the end of the day, I'm like, as long as it helps you, because I go to the example, some of the clients I work with, they like say they were in a car accident, and we're trying to train on how to, develop adaptive thoughts. And so one of the examples I use is like getting cut off in traffic. Some of the clients with that example of getting cut off say, well, maybe they were texting. That would not work for me.
Oh, I'd be ragey.
But for them, it does. And it's like, well, I don't, as long as it decreases it for you, I don't care. Like, I'm not going to try to convince you of my sense of justice. Like, it's for them, right?
Not anymore. Now it's a.
And I do want to be
fix.
clear about kind of these adaptive thinking, especially if it's meaning making about someone's behavior. We're not here to relinquish their responsibility
Sure.
from that. We're not trying to make excuses for them. We're just trying to change the meaning so that we're able to let go of it to a certain extent that it's not consuming us anymore.
Mm-hmm. Man, you got my brain wandering. See, the vindication for me, I think it would spur anger.
Yeah.
And it would spur the like nastier side of
That's
me.
spitefulness or
Mhm.
yeah.
And so I don't know that it would be healthy. And I don't know in anyone's spitefulness would be healthy or vindication.
We don't know if that elicits spitefulness for everybody though. So
Sure.
that's the
Yeah, I
difference.
don't know. I'm gonna be thinking about it.
Because, and some have taken more of a spiritual realm for this. Like God already took care of it. And for them, it's the universe is leveling the playing field. So it's like, I'm still that's why I asked the question.
Interesting.
Because for me, I'm like, and for the clients that they take this route, I do dig a little deeper and I was like,
Sure.
okay, so say that happened to them. what else is happening for you?
Sure.
I want to know kind of more of the underlying reason for it, because
The
if it's,
emotions
are you
and
wishing it upon them versus thinking that this happened to them just kind of gives a sense that everything's okay and you don't need to worry about a justice for them anymore.
I appreciate the thought experiment.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be thinking about it. At the core of this, perception matters. How you think about things is yours. It is not the other person's to control, it's yours to control. If you have a hard time controlling it, get support. But ways to help, like we talked about, compassion, gratitude, even soliciting feedback from other people. So this is how I interpreted this person's text. Would you interpret it the same way?
So I like how you answered the question as curiosity, because I was going to follow up with, we cannot try to convince other people of the meaning.
True.
If we could, you and I would not have jobs.
Fact.
Because how many people in our lives tell us, well, you should just think about it this way, honey.
You shouldn't be anxious. You should just not be sad.
No, you don't need to be upset about that. They have their own stuff going on. If that actually worked, like, we have to believe it ourselves. We have to work it into ourselves. And it isn't often just, oh, they're having a bad day and I feel better. I might have to tell myself 20 times,
True.
they're having a bad day. They're having a bad day. They almost shit themselves. There's shit everywhere. Their kids are feeling shit in the back of their car. Like, I might have to like do it 20 times. Same with like breathing. If we do that route, I might have to do it 20 times. This isn't just a one and done.
Right. You have to practice it. You have to change those neural pathways.
And it isn't like I do this and the anger is completely gone and I'm, you know, it decreased it enough to where I'm gonna recover. I'm gonna recover pretty quick.
I love this topic. I think it is something that is incredibly important. And to your point, starts when kids are little. I wish we talked about this even when they're little. We don't think of kids as having that ability, that cognitive ability to think about perception. And they don't in the same way adults do, but they are absolutely interpreting and creating perception for themselves. So if we can help guide that, all the better.
And we are unconsciously as they learn of how, oh, well, that person's not driving in a way, so they must not have their license. Or why do they have their license?
Lord Almighty. Start praying for my children. Oh boy.
And just questions to continue to remind yourself to ask is, why is this important that things should happen this way? Is it protective for me? Do I need this safety? Do things need to happen this way for me to feel safe? And it's a sense of control in some way. And it's like, why do I need that control? Where did I learn that? Is that going to be true if I go to a different culture? You know, some people might be like, I don't care. This is where it is now, and this is how it is. And it's like, all right, well, have fun being miserable.
Well, this has been Relationships Inside Out, where today we talked about the power of perception and your responsibility in understanding your perceptions, where they come from, how they're formed, and shaping them as you go forward. As always, if anyone has any questions, topic suggestions, please feel free to email us at relationshipsinsideout@gmail.com. Thanks.
Thanks.